So I just wanted to preface this video with there is a lot of spoilers when it comes to Red Dead Redemption 2 and the original Red Dead Redemption. So if you don't want any of that spoiled for you, maybe skip the video now. And hey, maybe consider subscribing for some future analysis and breakdown content, not just tied to the Red Dead Redemption series, but other games as well. Anyways, I'll shut the hell up. Enjoy.
Jack, come here. Be brave, son. I'm gonna go get your mama.
I know referring to Jack Marston as Dutch's last victim is a bit of a head-scratcher, and a small stretch. Jack was but a small child that was really under John's responsibility. And to add a bit more against John, and to Dutch's own credit, Dutch is technically the one bringing everyone together, providing a better environment than most of what the other Van Der Linde gang members knew from their own upbringing. Arthur even says the kid has more people looking out for him than any of them ever did, which are of course thanks to the strength in numbers and the perception of the gang being more akin to a family than a regular gang. However, just because he's better off than they were at his age doesn't exactly mean the environment and circumstances the gang lives in is the best thing for him. Nor does it mean he was able to grow up with a mentality or even the space that would allow him to separate and distance himself from this lifestyle, from this way of thinking, from the mentality that you will always have to look over your shoulder. People are reluctant to forgive, and they're even more resistant to forget. No matter how hard his mother fought, no matter how much Abigail got into John's head to leave his past behind, to move on and step into a safer, better life for their son, it ultimately wasn't for him. Their biggest fear, her biggest fear of Jack having his life of always being on the run sadly still came to fruition. It was a vicious cycle that, tragically, he may have survived, but he never actually escaped from.
Don't waste your life, son. Don't live like I had to.
Now, to really get the full scope of Jack's sad journey, we need to look at the whole picture. While it's been well documented and said countless of times, John's lack of involvement and struggle to properly connect with Jack in his earliest of years is but a small element. John struggles to be dedicated and finally accepts Jack as a son during the earlier part of Red Dead Redemption 2. With that difficulty of accepting actually being a father evolving into a difficulty to properly connect with Jack. This is seen during the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2 and towards the end of Red Dead Redemption, where they really can't seem to find a common ground to bond. But another element to really Jack's family is the Van Der Linde gang. This was all he knew in terms of family. Hosea taught him to read. Arthur took him out on fishing trips. Dutch and many other members can all be seen engaging, interacting, feeding his innocent and frankly very creative mind. He affectionately refers to everyone within the camp as aunts and uncles. This was his family. Regardless of what they were up to in order to survive, he soaked it all in. I think an element that is often overlooked is with everyone and everything here in camp basically revolving around Dutch and hearing constant praise of his uncle Dutch being an amazing man and fantastic man who would lead them all to a better life. This had to have been ingrained in him. Sure, he was quite young, but that doesn't mean he forgot everything. During the epilogue, he recalls Hosea being the master fisherman, but it was Arthur who took him out fishing and taught him how to fish.
Uncle Hosea, he was the fisherman, wasn't he?
That's right.
I remember Uncle Arthur taking me, though.
Arthur taught you how to fish now, did he?
Huh, yeah. I suppose he did.
That's nice.
So while he may have been very young, that doesn't mean that he was so young he can't remember people or certain events. And who knows how much that stuff is really buried deep down. Things become internalized and you start associating certain actions or events tied to emotions, and you don't quite understand the emotions you're experiencing due to trauma or not really understanding or remembering a particular situation, but who knows how much of that really played into it. My main point here being, though, is with this being his collective family and everyone within the family looking towards Dutch, he had to have the same perception of Dutch that really wasn't unlike Arthur or John's genuine experiences with Dutch. On the other side of the spectrum, while Jack wasn't out robbing and killing to survive, everyone in the camp was basically doing that for him, allowing the boy to enjoy the luxury of remaining innocent for some time. He was still a kid. He was coddled compared to the rest of them. The way they lived was rough and hard, constantly moving, constantly being hunted, but he still didn't know firsthand what it was like to actually take a life, or the experience of being personally chased after. As far as he knew, Dutch and other members of his family had to live cautiously. This is why they must all move. But they don't want Jack. Personally, I believe this created or at least causes the potential of automatically viewing those who are after his loved ones, what they stand for and everything they represent, as being evil, extremely hostile, ones to not be trusted, and to constantly be wary of. Without a fundamental understanding of what the Van Der Linde gang is doing is technically wrong and illegal, would only enforce the notion that these men in suits, the civilized world they're attempting to sell, it's not real. They don't want me any more than they want a pile of horse shit on their doorstep. They just want me dead. Law, ethics, and overall morality are complex issues that the kid can never hope to properly process, especially here where everyone just appears to shield him. I would argue this was the earliest days where Jack would blame the government for everything he's lost, with Dutch pushing a philosophy against civilization and a stronger government with better lawmen. There had to be some truth to everything he was saying, right? They had to leave Horseshoe Overlook after being caught near camp. LeKay Lake was immediately abandoned after these government men opened fire in a rickety shack attempting to kill everyone inside. They would later kidnap his mom near Beaver Hollow. No matter how much they moved, no matter how hard they tried to get away, these men will follow, and they won't stop until all of them are dead. With the epilogue confirming he does remember things, and it's proven the more we reflect on events, we begin to alter what actually happened a little. Days begin to blur. Important things he can recall being said to him or to someone else within or around the camp now begin to move closer and closer to events he remembers, when they may actually have been a few weeks to months apart. With this reminiscing and inaccurate recollection giving birth to a stronger narrative against the people hunting them. In a way, it was a gradual and thorough indoctrination of what Dutch was teaching. Dutch was saying things the people Jack loved and looked up to all supported. Everything Dutch said the Pinkertons and the government and the lawmen would do happened. The Pinkertons and the law were, through Jack's eyes, inadvertently supporting the gang's philosophy. For better or for worse, through Jack's eyes, this was the correct way. They had to stick together. They were the enemy. And yet, despite everything that happened, whatever the case, it looked as if it was truly a thing of the past at some point, though. Abigail was saved from the Pinkertons. Arthur made the ultimate sacrifice for them to be a genuine, honest family, and it seemed as if the main person behind the Pinkertons was dead. All that there was now for the Marston family was to just move on, with a real shot at Jack becoming something other than what his father and everyone before him was: outlaws. And it would have happened if it wasn't for John's inability to find a proper, honest resolution to his own issues other than taking a man's life. Moving into the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2, there's a few key things to pick up. First, John struggling to connect with Jack. It's riddled throughout the first part of the epilogue and does resurface briefly during the second half, once Abigail and Jack return to John. It's also something that even bleeds into the first game. Jack is still very much a kid, and one that hasn't lost his innocence through everything that he's been put through. And that's something that's very important and will surface as a main point in both games. Naturally, being a kid and one possibly trying to distance himself from everything he just escaped from, something that Abigail was actively pushing John to do, whether if it was just a pure escape or a mixture of that and just a hobby. Jack found quite a passion for reading. You can find him with a book and various cutscenes sharing his interest in tales of the Wild West, slowly shifting to medieval knights, which should be a great thing, but with his father not really knowing the proper way to connect with him, it leads to two problems. The first is Jack's feeling of being inadequate in his father's eyes, as he put it, not being a real man. He doesn't take any interest in what John does, things such as fishing or hunting. John is simply trying to teach him how to survive on his own, hoping that would be enough of an incentive for the two of them to bond. Valuable knowledge that he as a kid had to learn, but Jack perceives it as something his father just finds fun and takes no interest in it, while he escapes into what his father refers to as a dream world, stuck in books. I don't want to dive too much into this, but it would be a fair thing to wager that their inability to connect was a added feeling of tension that may well have led to a reminder that his father may be uninterested and willing to leave again. He does share his fear of John leaving in the first game, showing a reluctance to rely on anyone other than himself.
You are. Your back's tense and it's making the rifle jump. You're holding it wrong. Here, let me show you.
I don't need you to show me, Paul.
I guess not.
You'll show me and you'll just run off again or something. It's better I teach myself.
I ain't going nowhere.
Whatever you say, Paul.
Don't be like that.
Sorry.
So it's safe to say, whether if it was due to having to go out and hunt down Bill, Javier, and Dutch to disappear and just find himself, or Abigail taking Jack for their own safety, all of these events left some type of impression on him, and he was afraid of losing his father again. But what about the other problem when they finally do connect? Such as the time he teaches Jack to ride a horse properly, engaging in a playful race and allowing his son to beat him to build his confidence on riding a horse independently.
I beat you! I beat you!
Well ridden, son.
I beat you.
Like I said, your riding has gotten so much better.
Thanks.
Hey, keep practicing your riding.
You too. You need it.
Building that confidence even further by allowing Jack to drive the wagon with valuable goods they had just picked up in Strawberry. Well, the man his father was, what his father is, would be right there to remind him. And Abigail would be right there saying, "I told you so."
Maybe try Marston. John Marston. It's a long story.
Okay, John Marston. Marston...
On a small trip into Strawberry, a man in the post office caught wind of what Jim Milton's real name was. John Marston was being hunted by a group of men looking to avenge the man John had killed up in Roanoke Ridge, an event that happens off screen, but it's the very reason why the Marstons are down near Strawberry. They moved over here hoping to escape the hell that would possibly befall them for John's actions, which, by the way, it said John killed the man in Roanoke Ridge for just looking at him wrong. Now with his cover blown, word got around fast with a group of armed men trailing him out of Strawberry. People are reluctant to forgive, and they're even more resistant to forget.
Did you kill a fella out in Roanoke a few months back?
To absolutely nobody's surprise, John ends up killing all of them, but it's significant to point out just how affected Jack was by this. It's possibly the first time he's ever seen people die, let alone his father act like this. His naivety of what his father was is completely ripped away now. This isn't an event that's referenced in the first game, which makes sense, but Jack does say in the original game that while he and Abigail were in custody, he overheard a guard refer to John as a killer. If there was anything he knew for sure about his father, now it would be that he was capable and willing to end another person's life. No matter what it took, he's willing to do it, which would come to light when Jack's an adult. Aside from how his father treated hostile strangers, trouble at home was pretty common. John and Abigail fight incessantly, mainly about John and the decisions he continues to make to not do better for Jack. But to John's credit, to completely distance yourself and leave every single thing you know behind is quite difficult, especially if you're not particularly being left alone. And to Abigail's credit, you gotta put Jack first.
We got shot at.
Shot at? What happened?
Well, we got followed, and then
Followed by who?
probably someone who knew me. If we didn't get to them particulars, I'm sorry.
My son. Our son!
It's quite a thing to realize just when Jack and John were making progress connecting. Finally, after all this time, the first time they make a little bit of progress, Jack's life is put in danger, which is quickly followed up with Abigail taking the boy and leaving, which only makes his family smaller, and probably would have made him feel even more alone. He only had Abigail now, with no contact with his father for some time, a father that he was finally seemingly opening up to. Sure, it may have been for the best, but it definitely puts more strain on their relationship. The first time they reconnect after what happened, Jack is distant, not really giving his father a warm embrace, just asking if he could see their new house. The epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2 really kind of concludes their connection with them going on a fishing trip. Jack asks John if he wishes he was more like him.
Do you wish I was more like you?
Like me? No.
Betraying a sense of disappointment within himself and a lack of approval from his father. They reminisce about Arthur and Hosea. Then their time ends with John saving Jack's dog. It was a rocky start, and yes, he lost a little bit of time because of Abigail taking him away, which might have been the right call, but it was one that could have all gotten better if it wasn't for John throwing it all away for Micah. John tracking down and killing Micah was the defining moment to ending everything he and Abigail had built for Jack. For those that are unaware, you'll be surprised at how many people actually miss them. During the credits of Red Dead Redemption 2, Archer Fordham and Edgar Ross can be seen coming across the dead body of Micah, going around and asking locals of any information they may have. Now, from John giving his real name to the bank, people in Strawberry hearing his real name, or events in Valentine happening surrounding a man that matches the exact same description and MO of John, who exactly knows? Whatever the reason or culmination of reasons, the newly formed Bureau of Investigation was watching John and his family ranch on Beecher's Hope very closely. At some point, the Bureau ended up kidnapping Abigail and Jack. And if he ever wants to see his family again, John is forced to hunt down his former companions, Bill, Javier, and eventually Dutch himself. John's past yet again came to haunt the entire family. Similar to what we see in the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2, John and Jack's relationship isn't exactly easy in the first game, with even more time away between the two of them, and Jack now subjected to captivity. While he says the Bureau treated him fine while he was within their custody, Jack still is ultimately paying for the sins of his father, sins that he's constantly reminded of by the guards and everyone surrounding him of the horrible man his father is, a cold-blooded killer, the ruthless, degenerate outlaw. The original game is obviously written and created before its sequel, so there isn't much to really delve into that hasn't already been said and explored in the second game. They continue to have a distant and uneasy relationship, with a pattern of Jack returning to the presence of John to slowly open up, find some common ground, and when they finally seem to be a little closer to each other, something else creeps right back into focus to isolate and alienate Jack even more from John. Now, it would be the death of his father. The final two missions in the first game where Jack spends time with John, we see him run off attempting to hunt a grizzly by himself in an effort to prove to himself and to John that he is a quote-unquote real man, only for John to save him in time and scold him for doing something foolish such as running off by himself and nearly getting himself killed. With the exception of his kidnapping by the Braithwaites in the prequel, an event Jack most likely doesn't even really remember as an event that put him in danger, this would be the first time John has actually gone out of his way to save Jack. From Jack's perspective, that is. A complete 180 from the time his father had actually put him in danger. A complete 180 for the man that seemed so quick and so easy to drop everything and leave his wife and son. Could have been seen as the first time he was really his father's priority. John was officially stepping into the role of a protector, a role that was deepened with their final conversation.
Me and your mother will do our part. By the time your turn comes, hell, this could be the nicest farm in the county.
Maybe, Pa.
Just gotta learn to shoot straight or I'll eaten by some animal.
Very funny, Pa.
Thank you, son. Soon it'll be quail season. We should have some fun then.
Is there anything you don't like shooting, Pa?
Well, I ain't met the thing yet, but as soon as I do, I'll let you know. You can even put it in one of them books you read.
Maybe I'll do that. Today, John Marston stopped shooting.
It's one filled with jokes at Jack's expense. They both seem hopeful for the future, with Jack one day taking over the family farm, and Jack joking about making a book of the infamous John Marston, finally putting his weapons down and no longer finding pleasure in mindlessly shooting things. They also speak of the invention of planes, with John's last words of turning men into angels. Repeating his son's words in disbelief has always been touching to me because it's almost as if in this moment he cannot believe how advanced this world is getting.
One of them machines can turn men into angels.
One of them machines can turn men into angels.
A world his boy is growing into and will soon take over. A world that he'll quickly find out doesn't want him anymore. The sense of peace is quickly interrupted by an all-out assault on the farm by the United States Army, led by none other than Agent Edgar Ross, the man responsible for kidnapping Abigail and Jack, as well as commanding John to deal with Bill, Javier, and Dutch. He's went back on his promise of pardoning John and is here to kill the final member of the infamous Dutch Van Der Linde gang. Another reminder that the government and people that represent the New World doesn't want them. John is brutally gunned down, but that's not until after Jack saw these civilized men kill Uncle and shoot at him and his mother. Jack had no choice but to defend his home and all the family he had left. When there was a break in the fighting, he had no choice but to watch his family get split, with John sacrificing himself to buy Abigail and Jack time to escape.
No. No.
As far as the Van Der Linde gang went, John's death was the end, at least as far as the government was concerned. But it left a lasting impact on the surviving members of the Marston family. Just a few short years after the death of her husband, Abigail would soon pass away. There are no definitive causes that was given to us by Rockstar as to what killed her. I don't think that's really relevant though. Jack, now as an adult, is alone. The family he grew up knowing and who loved him were all gone, either dead or just scattered into the wind, trying their best to not see the day that their neck met the hangman's noose, or they rotted away in a jail cell. What remained of his family, his parents, given their best effort to ensure he had a better life than the both of them, one that wouldn't see him as a man on the run, a cold-blooded killer or a bandit that was ultimately alone. All their efforts, all their hard work, all their struggling, all their fighting, all their tearing apart to come back together to be torn apart again was all futile. They're both in the ground and Jack's all alone. Jack's story ends by avenging his father and killing the man who really took both his parents from him. Through everything he was put through, from the earliest days of the Van Der Linde gang to what would possibly be his last cherished memories with his dad, Jack had to have developed a deep sense of hate for everything this new world was. This civilization took everything from him. It toyed with his happiness and gave him the faintest glimpses of something normal, of finally achieving what he always wanted. His parents' approval and acceptance into society. His parents continued to do everything the right way, but alas, it wasn't for him. This world created a monster that was suicidal, angry, and more hateful than anything Dutch, Arthur, or John ever felt. They didn't have it all, only for it to be gutted away like he did.
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster.